Hey everybody, it's Mike from AMZ Advisors, and today I have with me Isaac Smith and Jason Snyder from Summit eCommerce Advisors. What do they need to think about when they're doing their bookkeeping and managing their business better by understanding their numbers?
It would be important to look at what you should be looking at as a whole, like what is important in bookkeeping. And so I think for those watching, just an overview of basic bookkeeping fundamentals, I think would be useful at this point. And we're assuming, if you have a really good understanding of bookkeeping, this is going to be a review. But if you're like most of us who really just get into this business as the entrepreneur who is just making things happen, and then this stuff comes along later. That was my experience. I didn't know anything about this stuff, but I learned over time. And then I partnered with a pro when we started our company, Jason. So let's go through these reports. So like if you are working with a bookkeeper, they're probably going to be giving you these 3 reports each month. There's three traditional reports. And I remember before I had a good understanding of all of this stuff, I would get these reports, I'd look at them and go like, what is this telling me? So let's take a few minutes and go through what these things are and what they can tell you. Jason, do you want to take over? We can hit the P&L, the cash flow, and the balance sheet. By the way, almost everybody exclusively talks about the P&L. Like that's all I hear when people talk about. What's your P&L say? What's your P&L say? We're going to get into inventory and its effect on your business a little bit later, but the really key thing for Amazon sellers is P&L only tells you part of the story. And especially your biggest expense as an Amazon seller is your inventory. Those are huge numbers going out, and those do not even show up on the P&L. So if you're only looking at the P&L, you're going to have an extremely distorted view of what your business is doing. So since I've given that distortion here, why don't we talk about like what the P&L is, and then what are these other statements that will give you the full picture?
Yeah. So to start with, everybody's familiar with the P&L, profit and loss, or another term is income statement. Those are used interchangeably. There's no difference in technical discussion. They're interchangeable. Obviously income, your expenses, cost of goods is the big components of it. And like Isaac was saying, it's only part of it. And in this case, a P&L for our Amazon sellers and other e-commerce businesses, it's going to be your sales, your gross sales, any returns, other types of revenue. If you categorize revenue in different categories, like different channel sales or other things, you can kind of break that out. But you're going to have your gross income from there. I advise if it's a big component of your business and you want to track it, to break it out into individual accounts, but then again, you need the system to be able to manage it as well. It's not enough just to say, well, I want to track it, and then not build the systems to be able to effectively and accurately track that as well. But again, on the other side, it's too much detail can be very unuseful and actually inhibit, running the business when you're too worried about trying to get everything tracked properly. So there's a balance between the two. Whatever's going to be useful for you to manage and run your business is what you want to do. So you've got your income, your cost of goods. This is going to be your inventory that has been sold. We'll get into it more in the balance sheet side. But inventory, just because you purchase it, it does not go to cost of goods. It's when you sell the inventory. Once it leaves your possession, even if it's sitting in Amazon's warehouse, it's still, the title is technically still yours. You have the decision to be able to move it. Obviously, there's fees and other things involved if you did that, but it's still legally yours until it is sold to a customer. and that's where your cost of goods would be sold. Sometimes you can incorporate your shipping costs to the warehouse. Other packaging costs can be part of cost of goods. But in most cases, that's going to be the extent of cost of goods for Amazon and e-commerce sellers. And then your expenses, and these are the items that are just the daily expenses of running your business. These are business-only expenses. There's other things that can be involved in it for tax reasons here in the U.S., like meals and travel and other things that we're allowed to deduct on our tax return. That would be part of it. I recommend to kind of separate things between operating expenses and non-operating expenses. Again, it's a technical detail, but it also can give you a clear picture of what's the, I'll say, extraneous things that are not core to the business expenses. Let's say your education expenses, travel, that's not related directly to business. So you're going to a conference to learn about some software or other things. Those would be non-operating expenses, but they're part of the business, but they're not part of the core operations. So you can kind of break those into two different categories if you like. And then you have your other revenue and other expenses. These are specifically for non-operating. It's just one-time events that you aren't going to be part of your regular business. And that would be things like credit card rewards. If you're buying a lot of inventory or paying for it through a credit card and you get points and things, a lot of times you'll get cash back. That's not regular income. We want to put that down in other income. And the same with other expenses, depreciation or other things that are amortization or non-operating related things would go to other expenses. And so that's kind of a breakdown of the P&L statement of what it looks like. With some other things, you have questions or things that we should add to that?
I think the next thing to talk about is, so that's the P&L. So your P&L is showing you what income you've had this month and what expenses you've had this month, and then bottom line profit. That's what everyone likes to look at, right? So if your inventory doesn't show up there, I think we'll talk about this inventory issue in just a minute. And that's going to lead us into the balance sheet. And so these are the things that when I was just getting started, I didn't really understand this stuff. And I think a lot of the viewers will know, but there may be some that don't know. What we were alluding to is your inventory is not an expense. And so this is a framework, just sort of an understanding that is a mindset shift if you're not used to thinking this way. So a balance sheet is going to tell you what assets and liabilities you have. It'll list all of the assets. So like your bank accounts, how much is in each of those bank accounts, and your liabilities. How much credit card debt, what is the balance of your credit card? That's a liability. Any other liabilities you have. And inventory, it also goes on to this balance sheet. So when you think about inventory is not something that you purchased. It's not an expense, like if you bought a computer, or maybe that's not the best example, paper for your office or something. It's not the same kind of an expense. It's not an expense. It's actually, inventory is cash sitting on a warehouse shelf. And so when you purchase inventory, all you're doing is you're moving some numbers on your balance sheet from your asset, from your bank account, and that amount gets put onto the inventory section. And that's important when people are thinking about taxes, because people think, oh, well, I just bought a whole bunch of inventory, I'm going to reduce my tax bill. It's actually not how it works. You only get to count that as an expense when you make that sale. And at that point, it is converted to cost of goods. So that's when it would show up on your P&L as an expense. So of course, as you're listening, you might be thinking, wow, this is getting kind of complicated. Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think it's clear that there's a lot of relationship between these different aspects of the bookkeeping and why it's so important to understand it when you're operating your business. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate both of you coming on the show and really opening up on your knowledge of this topic. I think everyone can kind of see how knowledgeable you are and how much this matters to you and the service that you're providing to your clients. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.